Hello and welcome to COS Indiana Live as we bring you Roundtable. The Roundtable segment is presented here every fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m. We'll be focusing on education and discussion of the topics and challenges we all face as we use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Join us now as we bring you COS Indiana Roundtable with our MC, John Ackerman.
Welcome back to COS Indiana Roundtable. I'm your host, John Ackerman. This is broadcast number 171 of COS Indiana Live, 171. Joining me in a few moments will be our state leadership team, plus a special guest. Our topic will be election integrity. If you have a question about this, you can ask it right now. If you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, just click the comment button and enter your question, and we will get to it depending on the time that we have available. You can also email the roundtable at this email address, raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. And then after the roundtable conversation on election integrity, I'm going to invite you to join Convention of States and show you how you can volunteer to help us make a difference. Now, before bringing on the panel, let me ask you to help us grow our audience. We're running in the about 200 people watching these broadcasts, and we want to grow that. We want to see it double and triple and so on. You can help us grow the audience by clicking your like and share buttons, and by making a comment or asking a question. You see, the Facebook and YouTube algorithms notice viewer responses. They know that something's going on, and then they show it to more of their audience. So help us grow this audience by making a comment and by clicking those like and share buttons. And now we welcome our roundtable participants. First up is our State Director, Dale Parrish. Welcome back, Dale.
Hello, John. Glad to be with you tonight.
And who's coming next?
Well, let's see who we can get up here.
Okay, there's our State Communications Coordinator, Ken Kashuba. By the way, when you make a comment or ask a question, old Ken is the one who's going to keep his eye on it, and time permitting, he's going to be popping your question onto the screen there. So, hi, Ken.
Hello, John. Hello, Dale.
Okay. Gary Harbaugh is a member of our Indiana team, and Gary always has some very insightful comments. We've got one more from the state team, Rick Lyon, our events coordinator. Welcome back, Rick.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
All right. And our special guest this month is Mary Thompson-Milkey. Good evening, Mary.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Tell me, where in the world are you?
I'm in the great state of Minnesota.
Minnesota. That's not Indiana. So,
no, it's not.
So what are you doing on the Indiana COS Live Roundtable?
I am assisting your state leadership team with their social media coordination.
Ah, so you're helping us in Indiana with our social media outreach, right?
Correct.
And I can't say thank you enough for that. I know that the paycheck you get is inadequate, right? It's the same paycheck the rest of us get. Yes.
John, don't bring that up. She's going to start asking for a raise just like Ken does all the time.
Well, it'd be easy to give all of us a percentage raise, wouldn't it?
Well, I could. I certainly could, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, Mary, we do thank you.
I'm so happy to be here.
Well, good. Thanks for what you're doing to help us with our social media. And thank you for giving us an hour of your time as we discuss election integrity. The first question that I'm going to put to the roundtable is, what do we mean when we talk about election integrity? What does it look like when an election has integrity? What are the signs of a good, healthy, safe, and secure election? And Mary, we always turn to our guest. We'll give you the first shot at answering this question, and then I'll ask if these other four guys have anything to add to what you say. So, Mary, what do we mean when we talk about election integrity?
Well, John, I think that means that you know that your vote counts. Everyone else's vote counts for one single vote. And there's no cheating and there's no external influence.
Well, that sounds like utopia. I like it. I like it. Boy, she gave us a great definition there. Does anybody, Ken, Dale, Rick, Gary, anybody have anything to add to that? Gary?
I would just say that an honest election with integrity has to begin with voter rolls that consist only of properly registered voters who are citizens entitled to vote and are still alive on election day.
Okay. That's a good addendum to what Mary said. Yes, Rick.
I would just add the word trust to that people feel like they can actually trust the election process. They can trust the election officials. And then at the end, they can trust the results. That, it doesn't take 2 months to compile the results, and then the results are one thing one way one day, and 2 hours later something else. So
yeah,
trust the process and the people running it.
Okay, you must have lit a fire under Dale. I saw his hand go up.
Yeah, I want to say what Rick just said. So, but I think trust is the key, and and the more I've been thinking about this, the more the trust has got to be in your state. I believe your state's handling of elections, and how clear and honest your state is conducting the election. So trust, I believe, is a big factor.
Yeah, and I can remember up until recent years, it was just implied trust. You expected that your vote counted. Everybody, one person, one vote. We expected that it counted, and we never heard of anything otherwise. But suddenly now it's become an issue, really has. So I want to go on to my next question and ask the panel, why is this an issue? Why do we talk about it now? I mean, 25 years ago, we didn't talk about election integrity. So, Mary, what do you think? Why is this an issue for us now?
Because of recent events of proof of there being election fraud in different states, I think it's brought it to the forefront that we do have a cause for concern and that we do need to put some focus on it in our individual states.
Okay, so there have been questions raised, and I've been aware of that myself. I've seen some things, I've heard some things, and suddenly it is an issue, and it's something for us to be aware of and to be working on. Now, Convention of States is really concerned with the Constitution, particularly Article 5, and the second way to amend the Constitution. But the reason I brought that up is that as I think about the Constitution, there's only one place that comes to mind where it talks about elections, and that is with the election of the president. And it says that the state legislators shall decide how their electors will be chosen to elect the president and vice president. And I don't know if there's anywhere else in the Constitution that even talks about that. But I think that one place where it delegates this to state legislatures, it really has the strong implication then that all of the elections are going to be held and conducted on the state level. I, for one, I don't know what anyone else thinks, but I, for one, think that's pretty wise of the framers of the Constitution. We don't have a nationwide election where everybody's under the same rules and regulations, but each election is controlled by the states. And I guess some states have done a better job than some other states. And so we've had some allegations of voter fraud and insecure elections. Dale, you have a comment to add?
Well, isn't that the decentralizing of the election process? Wasn't the one purpose of that was to prevent fraud? Am I right? So that the election is not controlled from one central source.
It's controlled in 50 different places.
But John, I'm old enough to remember. There's always been fraud. I think there's always. Can you remember? I remember. Was it in 1960 when John F. Kennedy was elected?
Oh yeah. Well, I wasn't even born until 1980, so give me a break, okay?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I can remember. I think there was fraud talked about in that election.
I think
Chicago, the stuff you heard about Chicago from years past.
Yeah, some of the reading that I've done, it seems to be accepted by nearly all historians that Joseph P. Kennedy got the ballot boxes stuffed in Illinois. And the one account that I heard is that, at that time, Richard Nixon was more of a patriot than what he is remembered for. And he decided not to contest that election because it would be so divisive for the nation.
That's right.
And
that's right.
Yeah, but see, I wasn't thinking about that when I was younger. I've found out about that since then. And so my growing up years, I always thought elections were sacrosanct. But I guess there's always been some of these shenanigans going on. The 1960 presidential election, prime example.
Yeah.
John, I'd like to just chime in that, we talk about why is this an issue and why is it important for us to focus on it. I think one of the things that we often forget about is our responsibility as a nation to be a leader of the free world, and that the rest of the world is looking at us as the last beacon of hope. And if our integrity falls apart, and if our elections become, controlled by outside influences, then it just reduces the hope of other nations of continuing in their fight for freedom and justice in their own countries.
That's a great point. Yes, Ken.
I just wanted to add to the fact when you ask why is this an issue, and going a little further than even what Mary just said, talking about outside influences, I think we have a major problem with this being an issue at this point in time, based on our media and our social media that was never available way back when the Constitution was written.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at why this is an issue today is because nobody can trust the media on either side. One side points at one side and says that whatever news station, that's nothing but lies. And then those people on the other side say, no, it's the other station. They're all lies. So nobody knows who to believe anymore. And I think at this point, the media has a major role in affecting what people think when they go to the polls. So, you've got people that depend on that. And when you get fed nothing but a slanted view or a media that at this point, I think everybody realizes there's a problem there. That to me is another big reason why we have this as an issue today.
Yeah, I think we recognize it now. And during the second half of the 20th century, when television was new in 1950 and so on, we had this mistaken idea that the news media were to be neutral. And you come to find out that there's no such thing as neutrality in the news, because even if I were heading a media organization and trying to put out neutral news, even the stories that I select to put on my network are the stories I select remove the neutrality, because I want my viewers and listeners to know these stories, but not those stories. And so it's a myth that you can be neutral. Yeah.
True. And I think it even goes as far as the polls that are used nowadays. Nobody trusts the polls.
Yeah, I don't trust the polls. Yeah.
Nobody wants to answer a poll to a certain degree. So
yeah, if I see a political poll show up on my caller ID, I just let it ring. Maybe then again, I know a guy who takes those calls, and he always gives the opposite answer of what he really believes. He intentionally lies to the pollsters. I don't recommend that, but I know that it happens. Gary, I saw your hand a minute ago.
Yeah, John, we can't let this topic go without pointing out that in the last presidential election under COVID, that state laws all across America were ignored, tossed out.
Yeah.
The election was not conducted under state law in numerous places around the country.
Yeah.
And it gave people cause to doubt the outcome and really the integrity of the process. And it made people to take a look and realize that, as Dale mentioned, historically, this has been an issue in various places, but I think it became an issue in many more places because we tossed out the rules for COVID. And
yes. And Gary, that's a perfect segue into my next question, because I want to ask exactly what kind of election problems have we seen. And this is a very good beginning point, jumping off point, because as I said a minute or two ago, the Constitution says, it's black and white. It's not even a gray area. It says the state legislatures shall determine the manner in which presidential electors are chosen. And in the face of COVID, you had governors and election boards and courts determining the manner in which the electors were chosen. And I'm not an attorney. I'm certainly not a constitutional attorney. But it seems to me there were sufficient grounds in many states that many of the votes cast were unconstitutional, and there were questions from the Democrat Party about the 2016 election. To this day, I still hear some Democrats saying that election was stolen. Donald Trump was a fraudulent president. And a year and a half into Joe Biden's term, I hear Republicans say, some Republicans, not all, and not all Democrats. So don't anybody nail me to the wall. I wasn't implying all, but some say the 2020 election was stolen and Joe Biden is an illegitimate president. So this is one kind of problem we've seen, where several states did not follow the Constitution and they let other things. See, the Constitution does not say unless there's a pandemic. It says state legislatures shall determine. So I want to throw this to Mary again as our guest. Can you give us one or two or however many examples that you're aware of on precisely the kinds of problems that we've seen? And you can make it as up to date and relevant, or you can go all the way back to 1960 like Dale did.
Well, I would say that one of the problems that we see are different states choosing to proactively just mail ballots out to people, and other states requiring that people who need an absentee ballot request it, so that you can ensure integrity and that chain of command of that paper ballot that is going to be filled out by the voter and returned. And that proactively just sending thousands and thousands of votes out in the mail allow them to be intercepted and there to be nefarious activity.
Well, here's an example. If I wanted to cheat, and this is a big if because I don't want to cheat, but if I lived in one of those states where an absentee ballot was mailed to everybody, I could just walk a block behind the letter carrier and confiscate those ballots from people's front porch mailboxes and fill them out on my own and mail them in. I could do that. You could do that. Anybody could do that. I know that mailbox belongs to the Postal Service. It's federal government property. And for me to remove that is a federal offense. But who's going to catch me? And who's going to arrest me? So this indiscriminate mailing out of a ballot to every registered voter, many of whom have left the state, many of whom have died, and they shouldn't be receiving a ballot. Now, Mary, along that line, 4 days ago, last Thursday, I was talking to a person who lives in another state. I won't impugn that state by naming it, but she told me face to face, eyeball to eyeball, this is a first person account, that she has this month received 3 absentee ballots from her state in her mailbox.
In her name?
In her name. And she said, "What am I supposed to do?" Well, I don't know. But why? Why would that happen? You know? So that's one of the problems we've seen. Mary, did you have another one before I turn to one of the others?
Well, you mentioned voter rolls, like when people move or people are passing away, that there should be some automation put into place where state agencies are talking to one another, because that's not happening today. The right hand doesn't know what the left is doing. When someone leaves, they still just have them on the rolls.
Yeah, this is true. Okay. Dale, Ken, Rick. Okay, Dale and then Rick. Some kind of problems that you've seen.
Well, I think there's a whole host of problems. Too many really for us to mention here. But what concerns me is, and maybe it's just me, but I never hear how many of these problems get resolved, how many of these problems get handled. And I don't know if that's, like Ken was saying, if that's the media curtailing that type of information, or what. Our CEO Mark Meckler made the comment not too long ago that he was aware that there were X number of problems. I'm oversimplifying here, but X number of problems have been resolved. But it's really only a small percentage of all the known issues that has come out of the 2020 election.
Mm-hmm. So we'd like to hear some resolutions of some things. I'd
like to hear some resolution on these, and I don't know. I guess that I said it's a state level issue, the integrity of the elections, and it seems to me, this is where Convention of States comes into play, and our core value of self-governance.
Yep.
It's up to us to make sure our legislators in our state are addressing these problems.
Indeed. Okay, I see Ken's hand is up, but I said I'd go to Rick next, and then I'll go to Ken.
Well, Dale's right. There's so many issues about this. We could probably spend 3 hours minimum talking about all these different things. But for me, I think one of the biggest problems with elections is the injection of machine voting into the process. The machines have, as Dale said, there's always been election fraud, but these machines are hooked up to the internet. And, so while there's always been a certain level of fraud, the machines have just exponentially made it easier for fraud. And that's proven by the fact that we've seen results come out where, you have a partial vote. Somebody has 368.4 votes, which is, impossible. So we know that programming issue with the machine. In the last 2 years, and again this year, I'm going to work the polls. And I know through the training, when I first started taking the training, I was kind of aware of these things like this. And when I heard them say, well, the machine is connected to the internet, and you go in and they give you their driver's license, you put that in there, and then the machine is hooked up to the internet, so it looks to see if they voted in somewhere else and verifies their voter registration. And it's all done under the guise of convenience, because by using these machines that are hooked up to the internet, you can vote countywide. You don't have to vote in your precinct anymore.
That's right.
So using the excuse of making it more convenient for you to vote, they made it exponentially easier for them to cheat.
Okay,
So,
good point.
That's I think is one of the big problems.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Ken, did you have a viewer comment or your own
Yeah,
comments?
I wanted to just take a short viewership break and bring in a few comments that kind of go back to a few things that we've already been discussing here. The first one goes back to your little story on following the mail carrier around. Scott Goldsberry says the people inside the post office wouldn't have to follow the mail carrier. So
Yeah.
It brings up a point that this fraudulence can happen within our government selected or government employed people as well.
Yeah. You want to trust that good people are in there and they're not going to do things like that. But there's a bad apple, in every bushel. Yeah.
But the other comment that came in was in kind of just to kind of point out. Let me find it again here. Was in regards to what Dale was talking about, and let me see if I can find. Lost it. They're going fast here, so let me find the one where our friend Susan chimed in about a happening in our own state here that boy, I'm losing track of where it went. It just had gone by me here. Her comment was that there were 4 people in St. Joe County. Here it is here. Who worked the election of Barack Obama were convicted in St. Joe's County and received 2 to 4 prison sentences. Of course, I never heard anything about it. So, in one sense, the media doesn't broadcast this kind of stuff. But I think this needs to be shown more, and people need to be convicted more often.
Yeah,
keep people on the straight and narrow.
There have been some convictions for voter fraud, and Susan, I'm assuming that they were convicted of voter fraud, not of something else. That's why you brought it in. So thanks for that, Susan. And by the way, listeners, viewers, you can go to, I think the website is heritage.org. It's the Heritage Foundation. They have a section on there of documented cases of people who've been convicted of voter fraud in the United States. And it's a long, long list. It's there. So, Ken, were there more viewer comments before I move on?
Let me see. Well, Susan was replying to that, just to add to her comment. It says they placed fraudulent names to allow Obama to be placed on the ballot.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I know. I think I know what that refers to, because in Indiana, Mary, I don't know what Minnesota rules are, but in Indiana, anybody running for a statewide office, and that would be president, governor, attorney general, there's one or two, and senator, U.S. senator, they have to get a minimum of 500 signatures on a petition in each one of Indiana's 9 congressional districts. And so I think what Susan was referring to was somebody put bogus names on a petition to get Obama on the ballot. And that would have been back in 2008 or something like that. Gary, was your hand up a moment ago?
Yeah, I wanted to say a couple things. One, I agree with Mary about the issue of the distribution of ballots. On the other side of that is the matter of the collection of ballots, and the placement of these ballot drop boxes was a massive problem in numerous states, whereby people can put ballots in there and nobody really knows who they came from, how they were collected. And so you have both, improper distribution of ballots, and then you have improper collection of ballots. And so you've just multiplied the potential for, election fraud, or certainly, abuse of the election process to change the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a reality. Any other examples of problems from any panel member?
John, I wanted to bring up one more comment that really came up last week in our Indiana Live program, and we weren't able to answer it because we didn't have and we still don't have our brain trust here, Marty Wood, on to really handle this question. But maybe Gary or somebody else in the panel might be able to answer this question. Scott Goldberry brought this up last week. He was wondering about oversight of Indiana's election, and it's being given to, he just said the State Department tonight, but also Ball State was mentioned. Does anybody know anything about why oversight would be handled by our State Department?
Well, right now, statewide elections are administered through the Secretary of State.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's Holly Sullivan. She got beat in the primary by Diego Morales. He's the Republican running for Secretary of State. And right off the top of my head, I can't recall the name of the Democrat who's running against Diego, but I haven't heard anything about giving it to the State Department. But it is the Secretary of State who holds it, and it would take an act of the legislature and the signature by the governor to change that. I mean, that's a major responsibility of all the responsibilities that our Secretary of State holds. That's a major one. Yeah. So I don't know anything about that, Scott. Sorry.
Well, we should be able to audit that, I would think, wouldn't we? Be able to audit that or find out, to be able to make that that state responsibility more transparent, maybe, or I'm not sure, again, whether it's a state problem. Gary, maybe you know.
Okay, Gary.
The Secretary of State, has overall responsibility, but the elections are actually conducted by the election board in each county.
Yeah.
So in Indiana, you've got 92 election boards that actually conduct the vote, within that county. And they don't all use the same systems or, methods. Hopefully they're all working hard to provide integrity. But it's not really a centralized, it's decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
And it's decentralized in the states as part of federalism, the idea that we're not a national government, we're national only in the sense of the delegated powers, and the power of elections was left with the states.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is that I certainly agree wholeheartedly with Gary. It's up to each county's election board to make sure that the elections are run with integrity. And in my county, where I live, it's Madison County. I know a good bit about it, more than I knew, say, 10 years ago, because I've gotten actively involved in recent years. I have a pretty strong feeling of trust in Madison County's elections. I've worked the polls for ever since 2018, primaries and general elections, and I know the members of our election board, and I think they're doing a good job. And I can tell you this, this county, and it's different in every county, but Madison County switched over to the voting machines by ES and S. I think it means Elections Safety and Security, something like that. They're one of the national vendors. And these machines by ES and S are not connected to the internet. And since we switched over to those machines, we've had 2 recounts, real close elections, and the losing person, filed for the recount, and they did a hand recount. It had to be done in open court, and the judge had to supervise it, and the public could go in and watch it. And in each of those recounts, the hand recount of the paper ballots matched up with the machine count, and so neither election was overturned. But each of those 2 elections were verified by the recount. So that makes me feel that ours are pretty good. Now, I think it was Gary who mentioned some of these machines are connected to the internet, and either Rick or Ken affirmed that. Last night, any of you folks watch 60 Minutes last night? Boy, is this timely. They had one of their 3 segments, an interview with the man whose name I can't recall, but he's the CEO and founder of Dominion Voting Systems, the ones that, Donald Trump's people said votes were switched and so on and so forth. And he said, I heard him say, and you can see this, you can go to YouTube and look up 60 Minutes of October 23rd and watch this segment. This guy said, our machines are not connected to the internet, and he's suing for billions of dollars of lost revenue, damage done to his company's name, and so on and so forth. I guess those lawsuits have been filed. It was the first I had heard of any lawsuits, but he swore up and down, our machines are not connected to the internet, and there was none of this shenanigans going on, and he's really quite upset about it. So I thought I'd throw that in there. And I'm not saying that what he said is true. I'm just telling you he said it, and you might want to go hear him say it yourself because it's kind of interesting. Yes, Ken.
I'll
What
just
you got?
go ahead and throw in a viewer's comment or response to your who apparently saw the show last night. But Barbara Chick says, I thought I saw ESSC was also part of all machines. Dominion is corrupt, and he killed himself in the interview.
Okay, Barbie. Okay, yeah. Okay, that's an interesting point. Thank you, Dale.
Since we're talking about a media event here, I just got to throw this out. I heard this on a news broadcast tonight. Major network. I just overheard it, but you know who Carrie Lake is? She's running for governor in Arizona, and this news broadcaster said, well, you know, Carrie Lake has engaged in election conspiracies and claims that, you know, this and that was done during the election, and she has not a shred of evidence. Now, this is a major news broadcast announcing this. Now, you know, if Carrie Lake made any comments like this, you know that she would have some sort of evidence, some sort of reason for saying something like that. But here, this major news broadcast made that statement that she had absolutely no evidence of what she's saying. And just imagine how many people will take that as the truth and believe with that.
If I heard it on TV, it's true. And
Right.
you know, Dale, that's very pertinent because it virtually every time I've heard anything in the media about election fraud, it's that tagline is always there. Without a shred of evidence, this person made this claim. And by golly, I think I've seen some evidence, and I think the news media have probably seen some evidence, but for whatever reason, they're choosing not to show it to their viewers because they've got a narrative, I think, that they want to promote.
Yeah.
And that evidence goes against their narrative. Ken, what do you have?
Well, I just wanted to expand or add to what Dale was talking about, and I'm not sure whether he saw the broadcast where Carrie Lake also gave credit to a 20-year-old who was working in her campaign, who came up with, he printed off all the different hypocrisy, so to speak, of all the Democratic Party personnel who had basically reversed positions on what they were saying, and she had them all printed out and stood right in front of all these news people and said, here they are. And she went down one by one by one by one, showing the evidence. There wasn't a peep in the audience.
That must have been a mistake for that ever to get on the air.
I won't disclose where it was from because
No.
it'll probably show some type of prejudice, but it was
Yeah.
it was actual footage of her standing in front of these news reporters.
And we're not here to badmouth organizations, and that, you
No.
know, Dale didn't name the news organization,
Right.
and we don't want to get sued either.
No. So I'm just saying there was direct evidence, and it was shown
Yep.
in video
Okay.
footage. But it seems nowadays that even video footage doesn't go very far and
Doesn't count.
People,
Mary, did you start to say something?
Well, I was going to just chime in. We're talking about the use of machines, and we're talking about, if it's connected to the internet, that's opens us for exposure. I think that even if it's not connected to the internet, it'd be very easy for someone who understands code to write some kind of a code that changes the every 97th ballot entered. Or
Easily.
something to that effect, to
Yeah.
siphon those
Yeah.
votes to one side or another. And
Yeah.
as fancy as computer hackers and coders are nowadays, I can't imagine it being that difficult to
Right.
intrude in the process in that way. They don't
Abs-
have to be connected to the internet.
Absolutely true. Yeah, because when you put that paper ballot in the scanner, it scans it, the machine counts it, and it's easy as piece of cake to write that code so that it shifts a vote here and there. Yeah, easy. And so that's why, when I give my illustration about my county, I give the idea of the two recounts that verified the paper ballots. These were two precinct level kinds of things, but so they were very small. It wasn't like a presidential election, but in two random instances, the paper ballots matched the machine count, and that increased my level of confidence. Well, I'll tell you what, it's 41 minutes past the hour. We're having a lot of fun, and we've laid out the issues and the problem, at least in an outline form, and we're going to come back after a little break and talk about maybe some solutions, okay? So let's take a little break, and we've got a message about liberty from something called John's Journal.
Okay, I'm going to bring this video up, so everybody please mute yourself. So while we're doing this, all right?
John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. I saw where Alexis de Tocqueville one time wrote that liberty cannot be established without morality, no morality without faith. Think of that. Three big concepts: liberty, morality, faith. Give me liberty or give me death. Freedom. We hold these truths to be self-evident: that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Liberty. We long for it. It's at the core of our human being. But I think de Tocqueville is correct when he says liberty cannot be established without morality. Without morality, you'll have licentiousness. You'll have everybody doing everything that they feel like doing. With morality, I realize that my liberty ends where your liberty begins. There was something, somebody said about my freedom to throw a punch ends at the beginning of your nose. If I don't respect you, if I don't have a moral compass, my liberty runs amok. So we've got to have morality. And then de Tocqueville said, morality cannot be established without faith. Now, I'm a Christian. I was saved by faith in Christ when I was 16 years old, and I was called to the ministry. I was a pastor for 10 years, and I was a seminary professor for 32 years after that. And I've been active in the church for 60 years, ever since I was 12 years old. I'm in the Christian faith, but I recognize other faiths also lead their adherents, their practitioners, into morality and thinking about what's for the common good. Because faith gets you outside of yourself, helps you to think about a greater than yourself. Alcoholics Anonymous calls it the supreme power or the higher power. And so when we submit ourselves to the higher power, the supreme being, God, we realize that there are other sons and daughters of the living God, whether it's the Christian God or the Jewish God or the Muslim God, and we are driven to treat them in a moral manner. And then that morality leads us to treasure and to establish and preserve liberty. Who was that guy?
Pretty good. Pretty right on, wasn't he? Right on.
Okay, well, I'm glad to make a contribution from time to time. Welcome back, everybody, to the Roundtable. We've been talking about election integrity. We've defined it and asked why it's an issue and listed some of the problems that we've seen. Now we'll go a little bit deeper and a little bit closer to home with this. And I want to ask the panel, what about Indiana's elections right here in our state? And Mary, I think, probably doesn't have a whole lot to say because she lives in another state. So I think I'll just, should I ask you, Mary, do you have anything to say or do you want me to move on?
You can go to someone else.
Okay.
That's closer to the issue, yeah.
All right, Gary, Rick, Dale, Ken. Gary, what do you have? Oops, you're muted.
One of the best things about the Indiana elections is our voter ID law. And Indiana's law, to my knowledge, is the first voter ID law to be upheld by the United States Supreme Court. And so it's a good law. I don't understand why other states didn't copy our law word for word, because since it's been tested at the Supreme Court, it could not be overturned by a court anywhere else, as some other voter ID laws have been overturned by federal district courts. And so it's a great benefit we have in Indiana that we at least have a good voter ID law.
Very good. Thank you, Gary. That's great. Ken.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that, to what Gary's saying. It's been a while, but I know at one point I had to file for an absentee ballot. I had to hand deliver that ballot, either myself or a member of my family, and be able to prove who I was when I turned that absentee ballot in.
Yeah.
To me, that makes, at least in my mind, it gives me a little bit of trust knowing that everybody else had to do the same thing in order to get that ballot counted.
Yeah, if the election officials followed the rules, yes. Everybody else had to do that thing. I think now there's been a change where when you ask for the absentee ballot, you have to give the last four numbers of your social or your driver's license number. And then that all has to match up with the what the Secretary of State has on file with your physical address. And if all that matches up, then they mail you an absentee ballot. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Dale or Rick? Yeah. Anything about Indiana's elections, good, bad, or otherwise? Yes, Dale.
I don't know the answer to this right offhand. I'm wondering if someone else on the panel knows. You mentioned about using the driver's license as a form of identification. Can a non-citizen in Indiana get a driver's license? Does anyone know? I don't know.
I don't know the answer.
I hear this using the driver's license, and I know some other states I've heard have been issuing driver's license to immigrants.
California does. That's known as a fact in California. They've done that.
Yeah. I was just wondering if that was the case here. I'd be surprised if it is, but I just wondered. So the only thing that I'm sorry, John. The only thing that I've heard, quite honestly, with regard to Indiana's elections has to do with the voter rolls, and that's where I know there was one county or area precinct, I don't know, somewhere. I may be wrong, but somewhere in the Noblesville area of our state, Fishers or somewhere, where there were more votes were registered than registered voters for that particular area. And
that happened in Fishers, Dale. That's pretty close to. I'm right on the border of Fishers, and that did happen in Fishers.
Happened in Fishers.
It was a significant number more than registered voters. So
see, I think if there's a weakness in our system at this point, it happens to be on cleaning out voter rolls. They need to be cleaned out.
Yep, there is a process, but it takes 2 presidential elections, and it's complicated. I don't want to get into the weeds, and it's not infallible. It's not foolproof, okay? Yeah. So some people stay on the voter rolls for years and years after they're dead or moved out of the state. Rick, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was wanting to make a comment on exactly what Ken brought up there. I had contacted one of my legislators a couple of years ago, I guess now, about this voter registration, and I suggested that why don't they just make it like the driver's license? Your voter registration is good for 3 years, and then you have to re-register. But the person claimed that there's not a problem with that in Indiana, so there's no interest in making that change. But it seems to me like when people pass away, that they would automatically be purged, in 3 years, or people move out, they would automatically be purged in 3 years. Seems to me like an easy solution to fix a big problem.
Seems to me like there could be communication between the health department, which records births and deaths, and when somebody dies, health department notifies the Secretary of State. And coordination with the U.S. Postal Service. That's federal, but anyway, when they get a change of address and somebody moves out of state, all they have to do is send that electronically over to the Secretary of State. Hey, if you don't live in Indiana anymore, you're not registered to vote here anymore. And that would take care of a lot of the names who don't belong on the voter rolls. Yeah. So
if they made it where it automatically expired every 3 years, then you wouldn't have to worry about it. It just automatically takes care of cleaning the roll itself.
Well, Rick, I can tell you what I think whoever they are, might say about that. That could very easily be labeled voter suppression. Yeah. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying I can hear the people saying you're suppressing the vote, and it's going to be hard on minorities to go register once every 3 years. I hear the complaints in the back of my head. Yeah. I worked the polls. My county didn't have enough voting machines in the 2020, the presidential election. And I worked one of the polls, and we had long line. People stood in line for hours in my county. And one irate voter, told me, he said, I think this is a form of voter suppression. You're trying to discourage people from standing in line and trying to get them to just go home. And no, what it was a fight between the election board and the county commission. They just didn't buy enough voting machines, and they knew going in they didn't have enough. But after the election, all the editorials hit the paper, and the election board pointed the finger that way, and the county commission pointed the finger that way, and it all got settled in this year's election when certain members of the county commission got primaried. And so that's just local politics, and it doesn't have any reference to what we're talking about here. But it was a dispute between 2 units of government that didn't get enough machines. And this guy told me, looked me right in the eye and said, "This is voter suppression." And I just thanked him for his opinion and went on because, okay, tell you what, that's pretty good. Indiana's doing some things well, and we've got a few problems to fix. Okay, and we've named some of that. I want to go on to our last question, and that is, what can I, as a single individual person, I have one vote, I can't change the system, but what can I, as an individual, do to help ensure fair and honest elections? And here we go back to Mary, our guest from Minnesota. What would you say?
I would say that it is your duty as a citizen to vote, number one. But regardless of your political affiliation, you should volunteer to your election board as either a judge, an inspector, a clerk, or a watcher.
Very good. You know something about how Indiana elections take place. The first three things that she named are required positions. There's one inspector at the voting place who's kind of the boss, the leader, the chairperson. There's two clerks, and those are the people who sign voters in. And there's two judges. Those are the people who take you to the voting machine and log you in and get you going. And virtually every election, virtually every county in Indiana needs citizens to do those jobs. And it's not too late. The election is 2 weeks from tomorrow. And anybody could call their local election board and say, hey, do you need help on election day? Now, it's a long day. I mean, first of all, you have to go to training before the election, and that takes maybe an hour or two. But then you have to be at the polling place at 5 o'clock in the morning to open it up and get everything booted up and ready to go. And then at 6 o'clock, the polls open, and you stay there all day till 6 p.m. And then there's another hour or two to close everything down. And so it's a long day, but you get paid for your time, right, Rick?
Yes,
You've
do.
done this. You've been what, a clerk?
I've been the clerk
Okay.
2 years previously, and I will be again this
Okay.
time.
Okay. So you're the one who signs the people in, you check the voter IDs. And if there have been times where you didn't have enough, I mean, there's 5 positions that you're supposed to have. Mary also mentioned watcher. That's an optional thing, but each party can appoint a watcher to go in there and just eyes on. So there are lots of ways that the citizen can be involved. Now, Rick, has it ever happened where you didn't have all 5 of the required people show up on election day?
You're referring to the experience I shared previously about, the first year I was there, of course, I didn't know any better, but you have to have 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats to sign the ballot.
Yeah.
Well, I was the only Republican person that showed up. So it was either shut down the poll, or what they actually did was one of the Democrats volunteered to be a Republican. So that's how we had the 2 Republicans. So whenever I went to lunch or a break or something, then somebody would come in and sit in. But I'm not criticizing them because we didn't want to shut down the poll, but
right,
the 2 Republicans that were supposed to be there with me didn't show up.
See, and that's a real problem, because part of Indiana's law to ensure fair and honest elections is that both parties are involved in working the polls. And I don't care what your party is. If it's all Democrats who run the election, are the Republicans going to trust it? And if it's all Republicans who run the election, are the Democrats going to trust it? But when you're looking over each other's shoulder, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to cheat. Okay? And I'm talking about on election day. So Mary hit the nail right on the head there. A, everybody vote. B, if you have that kind of time available, and a lot of retired people end up doing this. Oh, by the way, the times I've worked the polls, we also had high school students. They got community service credit from their civics teacher to come. They had a lot of trouble getting there at 5 o'clock in the morning, but high school kids were really good poll workers because they liked A, getting out of school, and B, they liked getting a little paycheck. Now, you're not going to go to the Bahamas on the paycheck for working the polls. It's really, as an hourly rate, it's way below minimum wage. It's just a token of appreciation. And elections are very expensive to run, so they can't pay the poll workers what they deserve, but they do. There is a little paycheck involved. Okay, I think that's it. But Rick has another comment to make.
Just real quick, I want to follow up on what Dale said earlier about, why aren't these problems being resolved? When we do see voter issues or election issues, and I think that's another important thing that we can do is that people who live in areas where there is the appearance of voter fraud, or if you're in Georgia where you see voter fraud recorded on video, don't let the local officials that are responsible for enforcing the laws, don't let them get away with that. Don't let them off with that.
Mm-hmm.
Just keep pursuing that until something does get resolved. Make them enforce the laws. If they won't enforce it, then just keep after them until they do.
Yep. And you might want to call the local news media, because sometimes they like to put that stuff in the paper and on the air. Ken, what do you have?
I just wanted to squeak in a quick comment concerning your comment, John. It's great to have high school students participate that way. I would only add to that is now all we need to do is get civics taught back in school again. And they actually have that as a report. Yep. And get some credits for that. But Susan also adds that she wanted to add that it pays better than jury duty too.
Better, yeah, it pays better than jury duty. Yeah, yeah. Well, Ken, maybe I just have better schools in my county than you have in your county, because there are a couple schools that have civics classes.
And that's good to hear.
That's good to hear. Well, folks, we've gone to 8 o'clock, and we haven't answered everything, but we've had a very good conversation about this. So I want to thank all 5 of you for your contributions tonight, and we'll see you folks next month. And now I want to show you a video of some young people giving their answers to the question, is the federal government broken?
Our government is definitely broken.
The EPA is totally out of control.
I mean, VA is completely broken.
If a private business were to run things like the government, they would be out of business like that.
Our tax system is ridiculous.
And how are we supposed to pay for that and our student loans and find a place to live with no job? I mean, it's almost as if nobody really cares what happens to us anymore.
There are so many problems that we have, and that's just going to be placed on us.
My generation especially, we need to lead, because enough is enough. DC needs to listen, and we need to take the power back to the people.
And so I invite you to join Convention of States right now by going to that website, conventionofstates.com. When you get there, this is what it'll look like. And you can join Convention of States by filling out those little white boxes there. That action helps you to sign our petition calling for a convention to take place. And if you really want to make a difference, click that Take Action button on the menu bar at the top of your screen, and you'll see this page. And then you'll click the box that says Become a Leader, and it'll take you down here that shows you all of the state level positions that we have, and you can apply for a leadership position. Now is the time to visit conventionofstates.com, click Take Action, and help us make history. That brings us to the end of this month's Roundtable. Before saying goodbye, I want to remind you of our email address. If you have any questions at all between now and next time about Convention of States, you can raise them by emailing us at that address, raiseyourvoice@gmail.com. Be sure to tune in next Monday, October 31st at 7 p.m. Eastern for our weekly COS Indiana Live, where the topic is going to be school board surveys. And don't forget our next roundtable. It's on the 4th Monday of November. That will be November the 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm John Ackerman for COS Indiana Roundtable. Good night.